into eastern Scotland to take us into the first part of Saturday. Elsewhere, though, a lot of dry weather once again. Again, variable amounts of cloud, a bit misty and murky around some southern and western coasts. Probably the clearest weather across eastern England. We're here, probably the coolest weather as well. 6 or 7 degrees there across East Anglia. So into Saturday then, and some of us will start off rather grey, a bit uninspiring, but like with recent days, that will tend to burn back to many coastal areas, but even here I think we'll see some brightness through the day. And for many places, again, it's a story of sunny spells, temperatures into the high teens, perhaps 20 degrees, and that sets the scene for a reasonably good day on Saturday, so plenty of fine weather to come, turning cooler, a bit more unsettled into next week.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton tonight. At a critical time for Boris Johnson, will the decision to process illegal migrants offshore in Rwanda save the government? I say everyone, including the outraged left and politically impotent Keir Starmer, should celebrate this bold tactic to take back control of our borders. My digest on that next. Then I'll get the views of my superstar panel. The Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and Sunday Mirror political editor Nigel Nelson. At 10:20, I'll meet the brave women on the front line of the gender wars. Caroline Fisk and Heather Binning, 2 of the founders of Respect My Sex, If You Want My Ex, the most important feminist movement since the suffragettes, and Helen Joyce, supporter and author of the best-selling book Trans, When Ideology Meets Reality, who was at that summit of cancelled women with J.K. Rowling. You won't want to miss their first TV interview. Does the government need to stop worrying about appearances and tackle the scourge of Islamic extremism head-on? Well, Anne Widdecombe, who was a close friend of Sir David Amess and attended the trial of his killer, is here on the changes that need to be made to prevent further tragedies and honour the late Tory MP's memory. What is life like inside Shanghai's hellish zero COVID camps? At 9:45, Mark Dolan and I will be joined by whistleblower Jane Polobokko, a Ukrainian expat in the Chinese city who has been trapped here, take a look, for almost 3 weeks, despite repeatedly testing negative and never even seeing her initial positive result. What's going on in China is going to shock you. We will investigate this hour. After ITV's political editor Robert Peston says the UK will become an elected dictatorship if Boris Johnson remains in power. Is the broadcaster biased against the PM? Well, I'll look at the evidence at 10 p.m. There's a lot of it, believe me. Should Northern Ireland women's coach Kenny Shields have apologised for saying female footballers are more emotional than men? It's all kicking off in the clash tonight as former England footballer Peter Shilton, infamous comedian Jim Davidson and journalist and author Ella Whelan battle it out. That's at 9:20. As he offers to buy the platform for £34 billion as Tesla mogul Elon Musk, our only hope for restoring free speech to Twitter. And is the social media hell site really worth that much? Rapper, author and podcast host Zuby is uncancelled at 10:40. And karma bites Harry and Meghan as they're snubbed by Dutch royalty. Has their addiction to drama, to borrow a phrase from the former editor of Vanity Fair, made them celebrity pariahs? Plus, in a campaign dominated by gotcha moments, what amazing response did an Aussie prime ministerial candidate give to this question about hourly pay rates?
Wages growth wasn't going particularly well. What's the current WPI?
I'll reveal all in the media buzz at 10:30. And don't forget, you'll get your first look at tomorrow's newspapers right here throughout the show. And at 10:50, I'll crown my final Greatest Britain and Union Jackass of the Week. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. Our politicians are having an infuriating intransigence when it comes to the failures and obvious cruelty of lockdowns. Take the leader of no opposition, Keir Starmer, today.
And I think about all those people who did the right thing, made heart-wrenching decisions, for which they felt very guilty, not going to funerals, not going to weddings, not going to the birth of their own children. Or not seeing elderly relatives. And this is a slap in the face for them.
What the hell? Starmer, are you for real? Missing the birth of your own child is not the right thing. Missing the funeral of a relative is not the right thing. Missing precious moments with a best friend who was forced to die alone is not the right thing. Especially not for COVID-19, which has always had such low mortality rates. Making all of these things illegal was inhumane, and I think we must change the conversation around lockdowns. My digest coming up on today's big Rwanda announcement by Boris Johnson. Then my superstar panel weigh-in. Tonight I'm joined by the writer and political commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Tory mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the political editor of the Sunday Mirror Nigel Nelson. But first, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. The top story tonight. The Royal Navy will take over responsibility for tackling migrants crossing the English Channel from today. The Prime Minister has also confirmed asylum seekers will be flown to Rwanda in Africa for processing as part of a £120 million deal. Boris Johnson says the government will have the capacity to resettle tens of thousands of people over the coming years. And the scheme will serve as a considerable deterrent, he said. He told a news conference the partnership complies with international obligations, but he is still expecting a legal challenge.
And it's climbing. And unless we can beat the business model of the gangs, I'm afraid it will continue to climb. And what we need to put in place is the deterrent system that will change their minds, make them see that they've made the wrong deal and that there's a better path for them if they really want to come to the UK.
Boris Johnson. Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, doesn't agree. He described the plan as a desperate effort to distract from the Prime Minister's Partygate fine.
They're unworkable, they're extortionate, they're going to cost taxpayers billions of pounds, and they just reflect a Prime Minister who's got no grit, no answers to the questions that need answering, and no shame. And I just think Britain deserves better than this.
Sir Keir Starmer. Well, hundreds have gathered outside the Home Office this evening in London to protest against those government plans. The Labour MP Nadia Whittome was with them. She spoke to the crowds there saying, shame on Boris Johnson. Meanwhile, an Islamic State so-called beetle has been found guilty of terrorism offences, including lethal hostage-taking and conspiracy to commit murder by an American jury. British national El Shafi El-Sheikh was part of an IS terrorist cell which beheaded American hostages in Iraq and Syria and then released the videos of it. The group was nicknamed the Beatles because they had British accents. Here, Imran Ahmed Khan says he's going to resign as MP for Wakefield after he was found guilty of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy in 2008. He's already been expelled from the Conservative Party. In a Twitter statement he put out today, he said he's now going to focus on clearing his name, and he apologised to his family and his community for the humiliation he had brought upon them. The Queen has expressed her sympathy for the people of South Africa after deadly floods hit the country's east coast. Over 300 people have been killed and hundreds more have been displaced in what's been described as one of the worst flooding events in South Africa's history. The country's president, Cyril Ramaphosa, pledged to help after visiting families whose homes had been destroyed. In a statement, the Queen said, "I am deeply saddened to hear of the tragic loss of life and destruction caused by the recent floods in KwaZulu-Natal province. The United Kingdom stands in solidarity with South Africa as you recover from these terrible events." On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now more from Dan Wootton tonight.
The decision to do a deal with Rwanda for offshore processing of illegal, largely young male migrants, most of whom are taking the perilous path of crossing the Channel, could well save this government. I have been advocating for this sort of deal to be done for months. In fact, last November, I warned the failure to introduce offshore processing could cost Boris Johnson his job. So I'm delighted to see he has taken the bold and humane approach announced today by the PM in Kent and Home Secretary Priti Patel in Rwanda.
We can't ask the British taxpayer to write a blank cheque to cover the costs of anyone who might want to come and live here. Uncontrolled immigration creates unmanageable demands on our NHS and on our welfare state. It overstretches our local schools, our housing and public transport, and creates unsustainable pressure to build on precious green spaces. Nor is it fair on those who are seeking to come here legally if others can bypass the system.
And the people, those who pay the evil people smugglers, get into the front of the queue, while we have people that are being left behind, women, children, families, that actually need our help and support.
So a plan, a clear plan. But do you know what Keir Starmer had today? Lots of meaningless sound bites, but absolutely no plan as to how he would stop the growing illegal migrant crisis, which saw a year-high 600 try to cross the Channel yesterday.
I think we need to see these plans for what they are. It's a desperate announcement by a Prime Minister who just wants to distract from his own law-breaking. I think it's a desperate announcement. The true aim of this is just to distract from the law-breaking of the Prime Minister. The problem with the plan today is that it is absolutely desperate.
So what's Labour's plan for immigration? How would you end the Channel crossing?
Well, we've been saying for some time that we need to have joined up arrangements with our partners in France. We need a much better Home Office streamlining of applications, but there's no getting away from this today. This is a desperate attempt by the Prime Minister.
So he's got his lines, but he certainly has no answers. The reality is that the vast majority of those allowing the despicable people smuggling gangs to thrive arguably fit the profile of economic migrants. According to official statistics, 9 out of 10 of the 28,526 migrants who crossed the Channel in small boats last year, 10 times, by the way, the number of just 2 years ago, were men. 7 out of 10 were single. And offshore processing, while controversial, has been proven to work. It's how in 2013, Australia's government literally stopped the boats. So there were 20,000 people that year Within 2 years, there were none. Zip, zero. Now, those young men who spend their life savings and risk their very survival to line the pockets of people smugglers, under this plan, will no longer feel they have a guarantee of a life in the UK as long as they get out of French waters alive. As a source told the Daily Telegraph, you are going to be met by the army. They will drive you to the airport and send you straight to Rwanda. That is where you are going to end up, in the hope that would be enough to deter migrants. That is why the military comes in, so you don't have battles on the quayside. Here's the reality. We already have a legal migration system. But with the illegal numbers growing exponentially and forecast to reach 6 figures a year, we cannot go on this way. Boris was right today when he said we cannot sustain a parallel illegal system. Our compassion may be infinite, but our capacity to help people is not. Those opposing the Rwanda plan will say they are compassionate and all for human rights. But what the hell is respectful of one's human rights or compassionate about allowing tens of thousands of poor souls to risk their lives across the Channel each year while encouraging a sick trade in human beings? It had to end, it has to end. The Rwanda plan should be the start of taking back control of our borders, and it cannot come soon enough. To respond now, my superstar panel. The Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson. So what we saw there, Dominique Samuels, from Keir Starmer was a lot of rhetoric, but absolutely no solution as to how he would stop the boats. So this compassion that Labour and the left talk about, what does it mean? Just allowing the people smuggling gangs to thrive?
I mean, it's allowing the people smuggling gangs to thrive, but, you know, a lot of people on the far left and within the mainstream ranks of the Labour Party do, unfortunately, believe in open borders. They think that we should open the floodgates to anyone that has a claim that they want to be safe here in Britain. And, you know, you mentioned so many of the poor souls that are coming over here and risking their lives, and I agree with you, but I think we hear about these people a lot. I really want to focus on the people already living here, that are on the streets, that are homeless war veterans, that can't afford to feed their families. There are so many homeless people on the streets right now. We quite simply don't have the room.
You worry about the numbers
to be housing any more illegal immigrants. And, you know, even when it came to the Afghanistan refugees, councils were literally having to buy properties, rent properties in order to house these people. We quite simply don't have room. It's not sustainable, and it's not like people are just going to be coming here and they're going to be sent off to Rwanda straight away. We're going to be distinguishing between economic migrants and people that have genuine asylum claims, and I think that's common sense.
And it looks like they are going to have a good life in Rwanda
as
well.
The difficulty is there are some human rights concerns, you know, with regards to Rwanda, which is fair enough, but they do have the
country's come a long way.
And they have the rights for asylum seekers enshrined in law. So if the issue, you know, for these asylum seekers is safety, then they should have no problem being in Rwanda if it's not for economic reasons that they're coming here.
Sean Bailey, you're a Tory. Is it fair to say you're not entirely sold on this plan?
When I look deeper into it, I think I am. And there's a couple of questions that Keir Starmer would have to answer. Where is your alternative? It's very
He doesn't have one.
Exactly. It's very easy to say this is a desperate plan by the PM, but actually it looked like Keir Starmer was deflecting because he had no answer. And if he doesn't like the government's plan, that's fair enough. It's his job to oppose. But let's hear what your plan is as well. Because the thing that strikes me is this. The current situation is killing people in large numbers, and it would only increase. And Keir Starmer and people on the left are showing they have no understanding of what generates crime. And what generates crime is the business model, a successful one, and the fact that people are getting away with it. Now, we don't have the capacity to go and find all these people in other countries who are illegally bringing people into the country, but we can disrupt the business model, and that's very, very important. The other part of this as well, of course, is these are economic migrants. We've got to be careful what we're talking about here. We're not talking about people claiming asylum. They will be dealt with as well. But 70% of the group that we're looking at are men. single men who are going through very safe countries to get to this country. If it was just about safety, they could stop much earlier and be safe anyway. So those questions need to be answered. And anybody who sat at home who has a problem with this, I would implore you to go and look at the detail. Don't listen to the rhetoric to those on the left. And when you're challenging anybody, ask them what would their alternative be. Because I tell you something now, when you see those dinghies in the middle of the channel, you have to worry because people are dying. And it's encouraging a business that is leading to great amounts of crime in countries around the world, countries that are poor that can't afford to have that crime.
Nigel Nelson, I presume you're one of those on the left who thinks this plan is inhumane?
I do. And let's talk about a solution. We've all been moaning about the fact...
Keir Starmer didn't have one, did he?
Well, he didn't say that, but there are solutions to this, and they're better ones than actually trading in human cargo, which is what this comes down to.
Isn't that what the people smugglers are doing, Nigel?
Yeah. Well, of course that's what they're doing. It doesn't mean we should do exactly the same thing as them. What I'm suggesting is that we try and actually find a solution to this which doesn't involve sending people to Rwanda.
But what is that solution?
Solution would be, we have a safe routes for refugees to come here, and we have various bespoke schemes. So we've got the Syrian scheme, which worked very well. We've done it with the Afghans, and now we're doing it with Ukraine. There are safe passages for those people. For an asylum seeker, there is no safe passage, no legal route to get into Britain. And that is the bit that ought to be changed. So we used to have the Dublin regulation. Brexit got rid of that. What it meant was the first safe country an asylum seeker landed in, they would have to claim asylum in that country. Should they make it to Britain under Dublin?
But all of these people are already in France.
They would have gone back. I know, but they don't no longer exist. Brexit got rid of it, and we have no agreement with European countries now to send people back.
But do you see what my point is, though? These are not genuine asylum seekers, Nigel. That's just a fact because they're already in France. So they don't want to stay in France. And there are people that are coming for a better life in the UK. Most of them cut up their passports, they cut up their identity cards. We don't know where they're from.
Sure, but if they're not genuine asylum seekers, they won't get asylum. The point I'm making is we should have a system whereby we don't have to claim asylum in Britain. At the moment, an asylum seeker must claim it here.
What's wrong with the Rwanda plan? Isn't this just racism against Rwanda?
Well,
saying that there's something wrong with sending people to Rwanda?
Well, they may well.
I've heard a lot of that today.
I don't like the sound of their human rights record, and certainly Amnesty has come out.
They have a lot of rights for asylum seekers that are enshrined in law, like they can live and work pretty freely.
But there are still disappearances in Rwanda. There is still torture in Rwanda.
That's more political. But I mean, in terms of asylum seekers, they do have a track record for accepting lots, for example, from Nigeria.
And they want young men.
I just got to say as well, Nigel is doing the sleight of hand that all the left do. We are not talking about people seeking asylum. We're talking about economic migrants. It's a very, very different thing.
Because we have a legal...
Sure, you don't know that's how they get here.
Yeah, but you're selling... We do because of the numbers of people that are arriving, because of the history of this. I would love to welcome all people who are seeking asylum. We cannot support all people who are economic migrants because that puts them at economic risk and it puts people here at economic risk.
But Nigel,
and anybody who wants to open the doors, fine, but answer how you're going to pay. It's very important.
Have them in your house.
Yeah.
Nigel, do you concede that the vast bulk of the single young men who crossed the Channel last year, and they're tens of thousands, and it's predicted to reach over 100,000 in the next couple of years, which is a terrifying prospect. Do you accept that the vast majority of them at least fit the profile of an economic migrant?
I don't know. I would imagine that many of them do. I would go with that.
Single.
Well, male and single are more likely to be able to travel than people with families. So I can understand why they're more likely to be on the move.
So it's for economic reasons then?
No,
because if it's about safety, you wouldn't think twice. You'd take your family and you'd go.
Yeah.
And also, they're already in France. They're safe.
But if they haven't got
this is the thing that frustrates me so much, though. They are in France. They are safe.
And that's the key thing. If it was only about safety, you'd stop at the earliest point you were safe, if only so you were closer to your
because,
family.
by the way, there's nothing safe about getting in one of those dinghies and crossing the
absolutely
channel.
right. But I mean, one of the draws here is partly because of English. We exported English around the world in our colonial days. These are people who speak English. A lot of them have. Yes, they are. A lot of them have relatives here, or a relative here that they want to join.
Yeah. And of course,
the point
people want to live in the UK.
Yeah,
of course
but
they
if
do.
you still
We are
had
a
Dublin
great
and you're in the EU, if we were, I mean, this is not an anti-Brexit sort of rant or anything like that. We wouldn't have this problem. They would have to stay in France.
Yes, we would, because when we had Dublin, which on paper is a great idea, it never worked. They still came.
It was still
so that's not a defence.
It was still
There is no plan from the left, and when anybody's telling you off, trying to make you feel racist, just ask them what they would do instead and how they would cover that cost.
Sean Bailey, Dominic Samuels, Nigel Nelson, my superstar panel. Don't worry, they're not going anywhere. They are all evening. But coming up, why are we allowing our fear of offence to stifle our ability to tackle the homegrown threat of Islamic extremism? Anne Widdecombe, who was a close friend of Sir David Amess and attended the trial of his killer, is here to talk about what needs to be done to prevent further tragedies and honour the late Tory MP's memory. But up next, should Northern Ireland women's coach Kenny Shields have apologised for saying female footballers are more emotional than men? It's all set to kick off in The Clash next, as legendary England footballer Peter Shilton, comedian Jim Davidson and journalist and author Ella Whelan go head-to-head. But I want to know what you think on this one. It really has divided opinion over the past 24 hours. My email, dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me using the handle @gbnews. We've got a poll running there too. I'll reveal the results after the break.
Hello there, I'm Stephen Keats and I've got your latest Met Office forecast for you. For tonight then, it's a mostly dry picture across the UK. The mist and murk will return for some of us, particularly around some coasts in the southwest. It's a bit damp towards northwest Scotland because we've got a weak weather front just fringing with parts of western Scotland, the Western Isles, maybe the far west of Northern Ireland. Later in the night though, it will also be pushing back into parts of southwest Wales, maybe Devon and Cornwall. So a bit damp here later in the night. For many places though, it's dry, variable amounts of cloud, a bit misty in places, and not particularly cold. Temperatures in towns and cities 7 to 10. Now into Good Friday then, we've got this front hanging in the wings out towards the west. Further to the east though, we're still under the influence of this area of high pressure. So that means for a lot of the UK, a fine and settled day to come on Good Friday. Maybe quite chilly in one or two spots first thing, a bit of mist and murk, but that tended to lift, burn and thin back to the coasts. Then for many places through the day, plenty of sunshine to come. A few bits of fair weather cloud bubbling up across eastern England. One or two showers possible, but I think for Northern Ireland, greater chance of seeing some heavier showers, perhaps thundery in the afternoon. Elsewhere though, warm sunshine to come for a lot of us and potentially temperatures into the low 20s in the southeast. Could be the warmest day of the year. Showers tended to fade across Northern Ireland, but a few breaking out across Northern England, Southern Scotland as we move on through Friday evening. These pushing up into eastern Scotland to take us into the first part of Saturday. Elsewhere though, a lot of dry weather once again. Again, variable amounts of cloud, a bit misty and murky around some southern and western coasts. Probably the clearest weather across eastern England. We're here, probably the coolest weather as well. 6 or 7 degrees there across East Anglia. So into Saturday then, and some of us will start off rather grey, a bit uninspiring, but like with recent days, that will tend to burn back to many coastal areas, but even here I think we'll see some brightness through the day. And for many places, again, it's a story of sunny spells, temperatures into the high teens, perhaps 20 degrees, and that sets the scene for a reasonably good day on Saturday, so plenty of fine weather to come, turning cooler, a bit more unsettled into next week.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Anne Widdecombe and Mark Dolan on the way, but time now for the clash. Northern Ireland's women's football manager Kenny Shiels was forced to apologise yesterday after he offered this analysis of his side's 5-0 loss to England.
Right through the whole lot, the whole spectrum of the women's game, because girls and women are more emotional than men, so they take a goal going in. They don't take that very well. So if you watch, you go through the stats, which journalists love to do, going through stats, and you'll see teams conceding goals in 18 and 21 minutes, and then in 64 and 68 minutes. They group them because that's an emotional goal.
Seemed like a coach scrutinising his team's performance to me. But his comments drew fierce criticism from ex-players. Former England goalkeeper Siobhan Chamberlain branded his interview bizarre, while ex-Arsenal striker Ian Wright took to Twitter to furiously blast the comments, writing Kenny Shiels talking foolishness, talking about emotional women. Didn't that man see how many times I was crying on the pitch? But the 65-year-old has retained the support of his dressing room, as Northern Ireland captain Marissa Callaghan said in a statement today that the team all stood by their manager, and she actually explained his comments by saying, "We feel his interview was in relation to a meeting we had as a team where we analysed that we concede goals in quick succession, and emotions was one of the many things we discussed. He is a man of integrity who cares for us like we are family." So what do you think? Should Kenny Shiels have really had to apologise for his comments? Dan at gbnews.uk, at gbnews on Twitter. We've got a poll running there. I'm going to be very interested in those results. But first, let me get the view of legendary England goalkeeper Peter Shilton, legendary comedian Jim Davidson, and the author and journalist Ella Whelan. Great to have the three of you with us. Peter Shilton, was this sexist, or did he just make a mistake?
I think he sounded like a manager who was trying to make an excuse for a 5-0 loss. And I mean, we've seen all that before in men's football as well. But you know, I certainly think he was right to withdraw that, because, you know, women's football has progressed a lot over the last few years. You know, it's getting better and better all the time. I mean, in any sport, if you look at any sport, whether it's tennis, golf, you know, we see so many times when women overcome, you know, they lose a bad set and they come fighting back, or golf, they play a bad hole and they come back. They're no different to men, but obviously they've not quite got that experience to handle the pressure and the passion sometimes. But, you know, it's not unnatural.
So you think men can be just as emotional, Peter? Male footballers?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you look at men, like Wrighty said there, he was crying. You look, Ronaldo's been crying on the pitch, Messi, Stuart Pearce in the 1990 shootout, crying. Chrissy Waddle was crying, Gaz was crying. You know, it's just an emotional thing, as I say. Sport is very emotional, and you know, things happen, and some people want to let it out by crying, and you know, that's perfectly natural.
Jim Davidson, you don't think Peter Shiels should have had to, Kenny Shiels, sorry, should have had to apologise?
Well, I think it's all part of this cancel culture as well, isn't it? He said what he thought, his opinion. Peter's right. He'd just been beaten 5-0. The girls, it turned out, have sat there and talked about emotional problems and mental problems on the pitch. So he said something. It's upset someone who's a bit woke, and they said, you better go on and apologise. I think it's a little bit sad.
Because he was trying to give some genuine analysis, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think he was. And I think someone's just stirring it up. Of course, women are no more emotional than men. And I've seen Ian Wright cry on the pitch when he's played at Charlton. No, but, it is really... And, women's football, Peter's right, it is great. But, it's very difficult to compare women's football to men's football. I mean, it's very difficult for me to talk about women's football because really, what do I know? I mean, even the leader of the opposition can't define what a woman is. So what's all that about?
Indeed, exactly. But Jim, I mean, what's weird to me is that it's even taken as a put down to say that a woman is more emotional than a man. How is it even a negative thing?
Well, I don't think it's a negative thing, but people set out to be offended, don't they?
Yeah.
They do. I think it's ridiculous. This is woke creeping in everywhere, and we don't need it. Let those girls get on. They've just been hammered 5-0. They've got to get back, whatever. And I love women's football. I sit there. Do you know what? You're talking of emotion. When someone scores a goal, it doesn't happen much down the valley, but when they score a goal, these guys run around like headless chickens, and they whip that shirt off. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that in women's football, to tell you the truth, but I'm not holding it. I know, I had to stoop that low, sorry.
Ella Whelan,
you know what I mean?
You are our legendary girl here on The Clash tonight. Were you offended by this? Did you think that Kenny should have had to offer this grovelling apology?
No, I think most of the time these kind of apologies that are forced aren't worth very much at all, and we've got a kind of obsession with trying to squeeze apologies out of people. It doesn't really move me. I mean, it was unfortunate that he made these comments, perhaps for him, in the same week that we saw Ronaldo slapping phones out of the hands of teenagers. I mean, talk about emotion run wild,
That was bad.
And and we saw in in some of the penalty finals in the World Cup how, in relation to the England team, emotion and nerves and all the natural stuff that would happen to you in a game might get on top of you. So I'm perhaps he said that he knows the stats on this. I bow to his expertise. I'm nothing of a football expert. But I think it's important to state that there is a bit of a problem with suggesting that women are more emotional than men. On an individual case-by-case basis, it might be true. But the reason why there is this stereotype that women are more emotional than men, and by the way, it's not just Kenny Shields, it's also lots of feminists buy into this narrative by suggesting that women leaders are better naturally than men because they're women, because we're more caring, because we're nicer, blah, blah, blah. And the reason why that stereotype exists is because women are expected to do the kind of emotional caring roles in society. We still do have a problem with men not sharing equal amounts of things like child work or housework or things like that. There's, not to sound cliche, but it's not a coincidence that it's usually the woman in the house that remembers your mother's birthday and has to tell your husband to send a card and things like that. From the trivial to the important stuff, there is a differentiation between men and women's role in society that quite often plays off badly for women, and I think that needs to change. I take the point about, there is an element of cancel culture here where I think people are extremely willing to be offended at the very slightest thing, and that's really not helpful for either the women on that team or.
Indeed, because Peter Shilton.
Dan, I think as a manager, it's criticising your players in public. I mean, they obviously spoke about this before the game.
Yeah.
And then obviously after the match, he's come out and used statistics, which, to be fair, that should be left in the dressing room, So I think he realised that. The players will probably learn by him in the dressing room saying, look, you know, we can't let this happen again, really switch on when you let a goal in, etc. But the fact is that he tried to make out that women were inferior to men in terms of emotionally. And, you know, that's where it's all gone wrong.
I think that if you assume that it's a negative thing to be more emotional, and I guess what I have struggled with, Jim Davidson, is that this bloke, Kenny Shields, clearly isn't a sexist, because if he was a sexist, he would not have chosen as his career path currently to coach a women's team. He would want to coach a men's team. So I worry now that any time a football manager is up at one of these press conferences, they're going to be so scared to give any real analysis because they're worried that they might end up being cancelled by the Twitter mob.
You've got it right there. Everyone's worried to say what they're thinking because if someone else disagrees with you, you're going to end up being cancelled. I mean, the only people that can speak their mind now, Dan, is you.
And you're very naughty still, Jim.
I have a go, but I'm cancelled all over the place. It'll probably black me out now.
He's gone.
If I can just
make
Ella. One thing clear. You know, the reason why people were a bit pissed off about what he said was not because he said that women are emotional, but because he said that women weren't able to control their emotions in the game. And that is a problem. You know, the suggestion that women are not able to control their emotions. And you can see why women might get a bit ticked off. But, you know, my fellow panelists have joked about women lifting their tops off on the game, which isn't very funny. And I've been introduced as a girl, not a woman. So, you know, there is existing in society, which I think we should take seriously. But forcing, you know, a Northern Irish Women's League manager to apologise for a silly comment is ridiculous. What I want to talk about is the real ways in which women's freedom is hampered in society. And I might take the jokes from my fellow panellists, but I think it's a very serious issue that shouldn't be taken lightly.
Jim?
Well, fine, it's okay. Some fall on stony ground, don't they? As I say, that was a funny joke, but some people set out not to like it. Even if they're being tickled, they wouldn't smile. I'm afraid that's what it is. There's no other way to look at it. It's ridiculous. Crazy. I'm a bad guy. I'll cancel myself, okay, Ella?
I think
you can write
sometimes there's things said that should be just taken with a pinch of salt, you know, but these days everything is either racist or gender orientated
or sexist.
You know, come on, let's grow up a little bit and just you know, let's just let some things go. And he made a mistake and he apologised, you know, but you can't go comparing women against men in sport. I mean, you know, if the England men's team played the men's football team, we know who would win. But, you know, that's a give me. But we don't expect the women to be as good as the men, certainly not at the moment, because they've not been playing for enough years, really. I mean, I don't think physically they would be anyway.
No.
I think someone's got it in for this guy, for Kenny. Exactly the same with all the problems in the world are going on, but they're still going on about cake. His team's just been beaten 5-0, and he's the bad guy for trying to sort that out. Crazy.
Ella Whelan, final word to you, and I'm hugely sorry that I called you a legendary girl. I was just making light because obviously I think you're an incredible human being.
I was partly making light myself, but I couldn't miss the opportunity. I think that part of the problem with so much of this is when it comes out the mouth of a man, it sounds really bad. But in actual fact, and people get their knickers in a twist. But in actual fact, this narrative of women being emotional, most often, this is the point I really wanted to make, most often comes from my fellow sisters in contemporary feminism who, for example, suggest that, Angela Merkel and female leaders throughout the pandemic were better at handling things because they're
because they are more emotional. I think you've made a great point there because you did see it all the time. Everyone was saying, weren't they, Jacinda Ardern, isn't she amazing? She's hugging people. She's tapping into people's emotions. So I do think you make a good point there, Ella, because these people want to have it both ways. Either we treat everyone the same and it doesn't make a difference what your sex is, or we can acknowledge that there are differences between women and men. Although I will say, I think I'm more emotional than any woman I've ever met. And I'm ashamed about it, but sometimes I just can't control myself. Thank you so much to all three of you. That was legendary England footballer Peter Shilton, legendary author and journalist Ella Whelan, and the legendary, very naughty comedian Jim Davidson. Thank you all. So, who do you agree with? Well, Sarah on Twitter says, FFS. Oh, that's naughty. Gosh, everyone's very naughty tonight. Of course we are. Chris says, they aren't as emotional as Atletico Madrid players, that's for sure. And Sean says, my granddaughter plays for Wales football and I can tell you she's a tough girl. Certainly not emotional, but totally dedicated to the game. And your verdict is now in. Just 17% of you agree that Kenny Shields should have apologised for his women footballers' comments, while 83% of you, with Jim Davidson, who say he shouldn't have had to. Fascinating stuff. Good debate. Coming up, what's it like to be imprisoned in one of Shanghai's hellish quarantine camps? Mark Dolan and I will be joined by whistleblower Jane Polybotko, a Ukrainian expat in the Chinese city. This is just so horrible. She's been trapped for almost 3 weeks, despite repeatedly testing negative. We really have to shine a light on what's going on in China at the moment. But first, does the government need to stop worrying about appearances and tackle the scourge of Islamic extremism head on? Well, Anne Widdecombe, who was a close friend of the late Sir David Amess and attended the trial of his killer all week and for many of the past weeks, will join me after the break to discuss how we can honour the late Tory MP's memory.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Now, earlier this week, justice was served as Islamist terrorist Ali Harbi Ali was sentenced to life in prison for the horrendous murder of the great MP, Sir David Amess. Watching all the tough revelations at his trial was David's close personal friend, Anne Widdecombe, who has tirelessly supported the Amess family since his tragic death. She's attended every difficult day in court. And as you know, because I've been speaking about it on the show all this week, the trial has prompted a barrage of calls for an overhaul of the counter-terrorism programme PREVENT, which failed to stop Ali, along with multiple other terrorists in the last 5 years. Former Cabinet Minister Robert Jenrick says even after the police detained Ali under the Terrorism Act, many were unwilling to countenance extremism as the motive. He's calling for the establishment to finally acknowledge that the murder of his friend was an act of Islamic extremism. Well, Anne agrees and says the government needs to stop worrying about appearances and ensure its PREVENT programme has the right focus. And she joins me now to talk about her dear friend, David. And Anne, I know you were waiting until after the trial to talk about this, and I know it must be very emotional for you because you were very close to David, and I want to hear your thoughts on him overall. But all week on the show, Anne, I have been wanting to shine a light on the reality of his death, because I feel people shied away from it at the time. They wanted to talk about online trolling. They wanted to talk about civility in politics. They wanted to talk about MPs not slagging each other off. But, Anne, that's actually not what killed your friend. This was a hardened, homegrown Islamist extremist, and the media doesn't really seem to want to tackle that.
You're quite right. I mean, this was a man who was clever. He's educated, he's articulate, he's intelligent, and he had a career before him, possibly at one point, as a doctor. Then what happened was he became what he described as self-radicalised. And we all know what that means, largely through the net. And he developed the idea that it was the will of Allah that he should kill people who were any sort of threat to Muslims, and he put in that bracket MPs who'd voted to bomb Islamic State. And that was why he decided to kill David. Now, there was no other reason, and he never said that there was any other reason or pretended there was any other reason. This was an example of extreme Islam. And actually, I think counsel for the prosecution, who did a terrific job, but they missed one trick. They said to him, counsel said to him, are you an extreme Muslim? And he said, no, I'm a moderate Muslim. I would have liked the next question to be, so what's an extreme Muslim then? Because that's what he is. Now, I think lots of things about this. First of all, it's crucial that anybody who thinks that a friend or a relative, even a very close relative like a son or a brother, who may be becoming radicalised, it's desperately important that they report that, not only in order to save potential victims, but also for the sake of that person. Because I'm glad, and God forbid that I should rejoice in anybody's imprisonment, but I am glad that what he's facing is not the martyrdom he wanted, to die in a hail of police bullets, take some shortcut to paradise. He's got instead half a century or more of being confined, moving between a narrow cell, probably with a loo in it, to an exercise yard which is restricted. He's never going to be able to wander free, not even able to do something very simple, like meet a friend for coffee, go out to the shops. Never anything of that sort ever again. And I want the message to go out to anybody who is contemplating an act of terror. That is what is waiting for you. And that, I think, is a crucial message. But the other thing, I think, is what are the moderate imams doing in all of this? Because they're the people that I would look to, and I would say, right, the message we most desperately need from you now is that this is not the will of Allah, that this is not what the Quran teaches, that this is not going to get you into paradise with your 72 virgins or whatever it might be. This is actually wrong. And that is a message which I would like to hear coming out more and more from the mosques.
Indeed. But Anne, the big issue, I think, with this case, and I wonder how devastating it must be for you as a close friend, that a teacher close to Ali actually did spot what you just suggested. She spotted that her student was becoming radicalised, and she did exactly the right thing, and she should get a lot of praise for this. She reported Ali to the authorities, and he actually entered the PREVENT program. But he managed to bamboozle them. He was too clever. The program isn't fit for purpose, Anne. And it just breaks my heart that he was there and he got out of it. I mean, how do you feel about that? And what does it mean about PREVENT?
Well, obviously, that teacher needs praise. She was alert. She saw what was happening. I do not expect the PREVENT programme to get it right 100% of the time. I don't expect any programme anywhere to get things right 100% of the time. But I think probably it needs to have a good look at this case and at what went wrong. And I suspect they were too ready to accept assurances, too ready to be deceived. And he is a very clever chap, and he would be able to deceive if that's what he set out to do. So I think, yes, the PREVENT programme needs a good overhaul, but I'm not going to point fingers of blame because there is no such thing as a foolproof programme. No such thing.
And Anne, I know the family are devastated. Their statement outside court was truly heartbreaking. How are they going to deal with this loss long term?
Well, as Julia said, that's David's widow, as she said in the statement, it's going to be with them. They're going to think of him every day. And he has left behind a tremendous legacy. When I was outside the court after the sentencing, and I had just done a massive press conference, and I was pretty tired, and I was just leaving, and I was stopped. And I was stopped by an ordinary citizen who came up to me. He's an NHS worker, he's ethnic minority, and he said to me, David helped me in the early 1990s when he was in Basildon. And I've never forgotten it, he said. Those were his words. I've never forgotten it. And that is David's legacy. It's not only that Southend is a city, it's not only that he's got a train named after him, but his legacy will go on for a long time to come, whereas in about a year's time, I doubt if anybody would remember the name of Ali Harbi Ali.
No, they will not. And that is the perfect note to end it on. Former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe, a close friend of the late MP David Amess. Thank you so much. Coming up, after ITV's political editor Robert Peston says the UK will become an elected dictatorship if Boris Johnson remains in power and there's a lefty loose women pile-on, is the broadcaster biased against the PM? My Superstar panel return on that. But next, what's it like to be locked up in one of Shanghai's dystopian COVID camps? Well, whistleblower Jane Polo Botko has been trapped in one for almost 3 weeks. She's here exclusively with Mark Dolan, live from this horrific Chinese quarantine camp right after the break.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. A first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages on the way, but time now for The Outsider. And breaking tonight, Shanghai has reported a new high of over 27,000 coronavirus cases, even though its 25 million residents have been shut in their homes for the past 2 weeks under one of the world's harshest lockdowns. The formerly bustling city now resembles a post-apocalyptic hellscape as the Chinese government brutally pursues a zero-COVID policy, with starving residents locked indoors, cars banned from the streets and hysterical daily testing. Food and liberty-starved residents have been taken to the streets in harrowing scenes, but despite the desperate pleas, the government is pushing on, warning that anyone who violates COVID-19 lockdown rules will be dealt with strictly. And the insanity goes even further, with anyone who tests positive, symptomatic or not, bundled away to these dystopian makeshift quarantine camps across the city. Well, one woman who fell foul of this terrible situation is Jane Polobotko, a Ukrainian national who has lived in Shanghai for 9 years. She's been forced into one of these facilities. She's going to join us live from there in just a minute. But first, take a look at some exclusive footage inside that she's filmed for us.
Over there we have the main entrance where people come in inside. And over there we have the main gates that are usually used in the peaceful times to get in and out. You can see that people they decided to create kind of walls around, so they put these blankets. These are water dispensers. This is where we get our hot water and drinking water. The bathroom area. It's not. It's for both, for women and men. There's no separation. This is where people usually do laundry, where girls wash their hair, where people wash their faces. Because as you can see, there's really a lot of those transportable toilets, and you also have the stationary toilets. So yeah.
Well, Jane joins me live from that very camp, and we're also joined by Mark Dolan, who has been diligently reporting on this barbaric zero-COVID policy right from the start of the pandemic. Jane, give me an update. What's it like inside, and how long are you going to have to be there?
Hello. I've been here 19 days. Today is the 19th day, and it's not great, of course. It's not the best experience because we were locked up in this huge building with around 4,000 people inside. Luckily, half of the people left, but unfortunately, I'm not one of them. But hopefully I'm going to leave soon. There is no clear communication on how long we have to stay. And government released, just recently, they confirmed the specific, how many COVID tests we have to have, how many COVID negative tests we have to have in a row to be able to leave this place. So I'm really hoping within this next 2-3 days, I'll be out of here.
Mark Dolan, this is insanity, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, zero COVID is a spectrum, Dan, and we've all had a version of it inflicted upon us. But the Chinese have taken it to a new level. And it's a reminder of how cruel and vicious this regime is and how bonkers they are, Dan, because this won't work. We've seen countries that have pursued zero COVID and eventually the virus catches up with populations. This is a tyrannical regime and they're doing their very worst in the name of health and safety.
Jane, once you're released, do you intend on staying in China, given the draconian nature of this policy?
Well, so first of all, once I'm released from this place, I have to do a self-quarantine for 7 days. So, yeah, it's not really, it's not exactly next to freedom. So, yeah, I would have to do self-quarantine at home for 7 days. And then, no, of course, I have a lot of thoughts to, I was thinking of even before the zero COVID, I was thinking that I haven't seen my family for 2 years, actually, because of the zero COVID policy.
Of course.
It was really difficult to fly in and out of the country, plus given the fact what Ukraine is going on
through. Jane, I know, and keep us posted because we want to make sure that you get out of there safely. So we'll speak to you again next week. And of course, Mark Dolan, I'm sure, will be on this story over the next 3 nights when he's here at 9 p.m. on GB News. It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as Boris unveils his gang-busting Rwanda plan to help solve the migrant crisis, the mainstream media continues their relentless campaign to oust the PM.
And if I can ask about the fine you received earlier this week.
You've admitted that you unknowingly misled Parliament.
And on the party situation you faced, why do we have to wait another week?
That sorry display follows ITV's political editor Robert Peston's suggestion that the UK will become an elected dictatorship if Boris Johnson remains in power. And also, this lefty loose women pile on.
It was the people that were around him that organised it.
So he's too thick to understand it. This is great. This is a guy I really want to lead us who's too thick to understand the rules that he's telling us.
No, who else do you want to lead us?
So is ITV biased against the PM? I think the evidence is pretty damning, but my superstar panel will return to give their verdicts. Tonight I'm joined by Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and Sunday Mirror political editor Nigel Nelson. I'll also sit down with the modern-day suffragettes fighting for women's rights in the gender wars. Caroline Fisk and Heather Binning, two of the founders of Respect My Sex, If You Want My Ex, and Helen Joyce, supporter and author of the best-selling book Trans When Ideology Meets Reality, who was at that summit of cancelled women with J.K. Rowling. Everyone wanted to be there, right? That coming up at 10:20. As SpaceX billionaire Elon Musk offers to buy Twitter for £34 billion. Is he our final hope to save free speech on the platform? Rapper Zuby gives his take in Uncancelled at 10:40. And Harry and Meghan have finally bowed to public pressure and paid a secret visit to the Queen and Charles. But will this be enough to save them from becoming pariahs on the world stage after their snub by European royalty? Plus, more Extinction Rebellion lunacy on our roads as their top eco-moron returns to mock police.
Welcome to Black Planet. With me, your host, David Attenborough Jr.
Make it stop, make it stop. I'd actually rather drink crude oil, I think, than be forced to suffer through another Attenborough impression from that smelly hippie. We'll dissect and debate all that in the Media Buzz at 10:30, plus new Greatest Britain and Union Jackass from my panel's nominations will be revealed just before the night is out. But first, the news headlines at 10 with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. The top story tonight, the Royal Navy is going to take over responsibility for tackling migrants crossing the English Channel from today. The Prime Minister also confirmed asylum seekers will be flown to Rwanda in Africa for processing as part of a £120 million deal. Boris Johnson says the government will have the capacity to resettle tens of thousands of people over the coming years and that the scheme may serve as a considerable deterrent. He told a news conference the partnership complies with international obligations, but he's still expecting a legal challenge.
And it's climbing. And unless we can beat the business model of the gangs, I'm afraid it will continue to climb. And what we need to put in place is the deterrent system that will change their minds, make them see that they've made the wrong deal and that there's a better path for them if they really want to come to the UK.
Boris Johnson speaking earlier. Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, disagrees. He described the plan as a desperate effort to distract from the Prime Minister's Partygate fine.
They're unworkable, they're extortionate, they're going to cost taxpayers billions of pounds, and they just reflect a Prime Minister who's got no grit, no answers to the questions that need answering, and no shame. And I just think Britain deserves better than this.
Sir Keir Starmer speaking. Well, hundreds gathered this evening outside the Home Office to protest against those government plans. The Labour MP Nadia Whittome saying, shame on Boris Johnson. Well, some breaking news to bring you within the last half hour here on GB News. It's been confirmed to us that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have arrived in the UK in secret and met with the Queen today at Windsor Castle. GB News royal reporter Cameron Walker has the latest. Cameron, any comment from Buckingham Palace?
Well, the official line from the palace is that they won't comment on private matters. However, a spokesperson for Prince Harry and Meghan have confirmed to me tonight that they did, in fact, meet the Queen at Windsor Castle earlier today. Now, The Sun is reporting that they stunned a group of pensioners when they spotted them wandering around the grounds at Windsor Castle. But I think it's hardly surprising the level of secrecy involved with this, because we know that Prince Harry has expressed security concerns when he's in the UK. He's lost that Met Police protection. And when he decided to step back as a senior working member of the royal family.
Cameron Walker, thank you. Well, in other news today, Russian state media has reported the warship Moskva has sunk in the Black Sea as it was being towed back to port following an explosion. Earlier today, the Ukrainian military said it hit the Soviet-era flagship with a missile, causing serious damage. Officials said it reportedly started to sink after ammunition on board the vessel exploded. The Kremlin said that over 500 crew aboard were evacuated and said the incident was under investigation. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GBNews. Now more from Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. And we've got just one front page in so far, The Guardian, and this is predictable, isn't it? They say the Rwanda asylum seekers plan has been branded inhumane. A down payment of £120 million will be handed to the Rwandan government in the hope it will accept tens of thousands of people. My superstar panel back with me now, the Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson. Now, we all know by now that the mainstream media in this country has a pretty hard time hiding its political bias. But ITV has unashamedly blown its cover over the past 24 hours with a hat-trick of own goals as an anti-Boris broadcaster. So political editor Robert Peston, he led proceedings with this cringeworthy take on, yep, you guessed it, Partygate, in a rambling tweet about Boris running a dictatorship. Peston said, if Tory MPs unthinkingly keep him in office without a proper and public assessment of how Parliament was misled, because that is what suits them, and if they blithely ignore the ministerial code, then the charge will stick that this or any party with a big majority is simply an elected dictatorship and the Constitution means little or nothing. This is not just a slippery slope, it is the bottom of the slope. Dictatorship? Bottom of the slope? I'm sorry, I thought ITV News was meant to show impartial public service broadcasting. The Daily Mail hit the right tone in an article today as they rightly covered Peston's bias storm. But if that wasn't bad enough, Peston's deputy, Anushka Astana, decided she too would get in on the action by hijacking a government press conference on Rwanda, clearly the most important story today, to ask about Partygate.
And a quick question, because I'm not patient enough to wait, so I hope you will answer it. But on Tuesday, you've admitted that you unknowingly misled Parliament. I just want to understand if you're going to put the record straight.
Yeah. Thanks. So on the second point, again, Anushka, forgive me, you're going to have to wait until I come to Parliament. Of course, I will set the record straight in any way that I can. But on.
And even on ITV's supposedly light entertainment show Loose Women, the telly legend Linda Robson was pounced on by other panellists for daring to bring some common sense to the debate by defending Boris.
Also, he didn't organise the party, did he? He didn't organise a party. He nearly died a couple of weeks before. He'd been in hospital, he nearly died, so he made a mistake.
Linda, this is a man who is a leader. Leaders should lead. Leaders should not make excuses for getting it wrong.
This has hurt a lot of people. And for the Tories to keep telling us that we've just got to get over it because it's 2 years ago, it's not on. It's not on.
But I totally understand that. And there's a war going on and people lost lives and people lost loved ones during lockdown.
And we're allowed to see them.
But my daughter lost her dad during lockdown. She wasn't allowed to go to the hospital, but I told her to go. I said, just go.
If the police had caught you, they would have fined you because you weren't allowed to do it.
But Linda, he didn't organise the party, did he? They just brought in a cake for him and saying happy birthday to him. It wasn't him that organised it. It was the people that were around him that organised it.
So she's too thick to understand it. This is great. This is a guy I really want to lead us, who's too thick to understand the rules that he's telling us.
No, who else do you want to lead us?
Poor Linda. That's what happens on ITV if you say one thing in defence of Boris Johnson's. Their antics over the past 24 hours would actually be mildly amusing if it wasn't also embarrassingly tragic. Former Tory Minister Rob Wilson summed it up nicely when he commented today, Peston has seemingly forgotten the old-fashioned values of journalism that relied upon impartiality, gathering the facts and merely reporting the story so that people can make up their own mind. This tweet is a journalist implicitly suggesting a democratically elected PM should be removed by their political party. So, Nigel Nelson, you work with these folk. This seemed highly unprofessional from Robert Peston.
Working through the three examples there, the Robert Peston one, I've got some sympathy with his sentiments, but he shouldn't have said it. He works for a channel which prides itself in its political impartiality. That stretches to your presenters when they go out and tweet or whatever. So he may hold that opinion. I probably hold something very similar myself, but he should not have said it. Anushka's question at the press conference, perfectly legitimate, used to happen a lot at the various COVID press conferences as well. It just depends on what the story of the day is. And a journalist wants to get a question in, good for her for doing that. Loose Women, discussion show, people have opinions. I don't see anything untoward about what happened there.
Sean, that was a pile-on, Linda Robson.
Yes, it was. But what I'm suggesting there is that they're entitled then on a show like that. It's not a news show, after all. Yeah. They're entitled to actually have their own opinions.
It goes in a different way. What Robert Peston did was actually show what's really going on in the chattering classes. You're not allowed to have an opinion that is different. And the same thing happened on Loose Women. Loose Women have the right to have that. That's the nature of their show. They don't purport to be professional journalists. That's correct. But what Peston done is two important things. He has shown why people respect the press less and less and less and try to get their media from elsewhere, because people now know they're dealing with people who are pushing their agenda. Most journalists now are actually political activists. And it would be fine if they said they were, but they pretend to be journalists and they're actually political activists and they're peddling a lie.
That's the issue, isn't it, Dominique? They claim that they're impartial.
And they're just not. And I think, not an elected dictatorship, but I think probably a journalistic dictatorship. Because that's what it is.
Well, exactly. It's the media thinking that they can get rid of a prime minister. Exactly. That's up to the people to decide.
And what I find funny about this is, yes, I think what Boris did was reprehensible, but at the same time, these are the same journalists that were also attacking the government for not bringing in harder, faster lockdowns. So you were pushing for these inhumane rules, and rightly or wrongly, the government did bow into them. It bowed into the media pressure and did impose lockdowns. But you were pushing for these things unnecessarily, completely irrationally, and now you're surprised that civil servants and people within Downing Street broke them. I think it's hypocritical.
Indeed. Surprise, surprise, they're at it again. Eco-crusties from Just Stop Oil glued themselves to an oil tanker in West London today, right before a record 21.5 million drivers hit the roads for Easter weekend. It comes after their literal partners in crime at Extinction Rebellion pulled similar stunts at Lloyd's of London on Tuesday. Eco-zealots glued themselves to an Eddy Stop Mart vehicle in Chiswick this morning and truly outdid themselves in terms of insufferability. Watch.
This is why we're doing this. I don't want to be stuck to a window. I'd rather be with my family.
Welcome to Black Planet. With me, your host, David Attenborough Jr. Here we have the strange Homo sapiens that wear the yellow jackets and the black jackets, and they follow the orders, knowing full well that the orders that they're given will ultimately kill everything they love.
I'm glued onto the floor because it's the only action I feel I can take.
My message to all of them is get a haircut and get a real job. I mean, this loony mob, they just keep on embarrassing themselves, don't they? Oh, goodness me. Goodness me. Why would they want to spend their half-term holidays gluing themselves to skyscrapers is anyone's guess, especially when none of the staff who actually work in those buildings are there. Madness. Dominic Samuels, Sean Bailey, Nigel Nelson, do stand by. Because coming up, as Harry and Meghan scuttle back into the UK for a secret meeting with the Queen and Prince Charles, has their addiction to controversy made them celebrity pariahs? My superstar panel will return to debate that, and we'll have more front pages coming up soon. But next, I meet the modern-day suffragettes, Caroline Fisk and Heather Binning, two of the founders of Respect My Sex, If You Want My Ex, and Helen Joyce, supporter and author of the best-selling book Trans, When Ideology Meets Reality, who was at that lunch that everyone's talking about with J.K. Rowling. They're here for their first big TV interview in just 2 minutes.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's 2 questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. It seems chilling and almost unbelievable, doesn't it, that in 2022, a new women's rights movement, the most historically significant since the suffragettes, is required to protect biological females. But I actually have no doubt that this movement is now imperative and urgent, and that's why I fully support the new campaign, Respect My Sex, If You Want My Ex, whose leaders, Caroline Fisk, Maya Forstater and Heather Binning, appeared on this really brilliant Daily Mail front page to fire a warning to our gutless leaders ahead of the May local elections. The new campaign brings together the brains behind 3 vital women's rights groups, and I'm delighted to say 2 of the brave activists, Caroline of Women Uniting and Heather of the Women's Rights Network, have joined me in the studio. They're alongside their fellow Respect My Sex, If You Want My Ex campaigner, the author and director of advocacy at the campaign group Sex Matters, Helen Joyce, who was a guest at J.K. Rowling's Sunday lunch, which the Harry Potter author hosted to support all of these brilliant campaigns. And thank you so much for being here this evening. Caroline, did you have any idea what impact this campaign was going to have? Because when I spoke about it on the show for the first time, the response from viewers was overwhelming.
OK, so many of us started on Twitter and social media. So we really started small. We were scared. Many of us were anonymous. We found each other, Twitter, Facebook, Mumsnet, and slowly got bigger and braver, started our different groups, Women's Rights Network, Sex Matters, all of Women Uniting are from different political parties. And so from that small beginning, we started this campaign.
And I think...
You know what? Sorry, let me just finish.
Yes,
we originally just thought, you know, we'll be going for it on Twitter. We might be trying to get it trending. So it's been successful beyond our wildest dreams, and it just shows everybody's ready for it. Everybody's ready to speak out loud about this subject and to say that sex matters.
And I think what's obviously really important is you brought the groups together as well, so
Yes.
there's a united voice. Heather, can you just explain for people who don't know what the fundamental goal of the campaign is and how people can get involved? Because what you're essentially saying is that before the local elections, there's a real opportunity, isn't there, to test the people who you're going to be voting for.
Oh, huge opportunity. What I know from all the women in the network, and also outside the network, we hear from others anyway, is that women are politically homeless at the moment. They don't know who to vote for. They don't feel they can vote for Labour or Lib Dems, or, you know, they're just not getting the response from politicians that they want in terms of what happens to it, what it means for them. And so responding to that, we thought, well, let's get these questions out there. I mean, you've seen there's been plenty of footage of the government politicians stumbling over this thing. It's such a difficult thing. I'm not a biologist. It's complicated, you know, and this is so frustrating to women. It is not complicated. This is the easiest thing in the world. It's only complicated if A, you're being bullied, or B, you think the votes are sitting in another direction. So this was a big moment to try and get those questions out. It's local politics, so we really didn't think we'd have this big impact that we have, as Caroline said. But get the questions asked at the doorstep. I think it was David Lammy, or quite a number of them, said this never arises on the doorstep. So we thought, right, number one, it's going to change
you
that.
talk about those politicians and their reaction. So I've put together some of the best, or you might say the worst. So let's take a look, and Helen, I'll get you to respond off the back.
What is a woman?
Well, I thought the Prime Minister answered this brilliantly in Prime Minister's Question Times, in Prime Minister's Questions this week, and I fully agree with him.
And so what is your definition of a woman?
As I said, I would exactly agree with what the Prime Minister said at Prime Minister's Question Time.
When we're having a social media or a debate around what genitalia someone's got, I think it really debases the serious issues that people face.
A woman can have a penis.
I don't think that discussing this issue in this way helps anyone in the long run.
People are complex, that they are different.
Well, I have to say that there are different definitions legally around what a woman actually is. I mean, you look at the definition within the Equality Act, and I think it just says someone who is adult and female, I think, but then doesn't say how you define either of those things.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Look, is it transphobic? Look, I don't even know how to start answering these questions.
Helen, I mean, this is why we need your campaign, right? Your reaction.
It's extremely painful to watch, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, for two reasons. One is they all know they're going to get asked. So would you, for the love of God, would you please prepare a decent answer and just say it? If you're going to talk absolute nonsense, would you not do the whole stuttering rubbish beforehand? But the second thing is, why are we asking this question? It's not because we want to catch somebody out. It's not a gotcha question. It's not a trivial question. The reason is that some of our human rights are sex-based rights. Some of them are for men, some of them are for women, some of them require that you can say who is a man and who is a woman. Child safeguarding, for example. It is impossible to keep children safe if you cannot talk about human sex.
Yeah.
If you cannot say this person is male, this person is female, those two people should not be in this space sleeping together. If you cannot say those things, you cannot keep children safe. You cannot give women dignity and privacy. And so it's not a gotcha question. We're asking people, can you give women safety, privacy and dignity? Do you know what child safeguarding is? And the short way to ask that question of somebody is to say, what's a woman? What's sex?
Indeed. And Karen, I think it's also really important to point out, isn't it, that that doesn't make you transphobic.
Absolutely not. So
that's what you're accused of a lot.
Yeah. So I would say we're all, across our campaign, very clear that in a free society, we can all explore our identity, describe ourselves how we like, dress how we like, love who we want to love. So we can explore our identity, but sex is real and sex matters. As Helen said, very particularly for women, for our dignity, our privacy and our safety in prisons, in hospital wards, in sports. So identify how you like, but sex is real and sex matters.
Helen, you're one of the women who was cancelled, really, weren't you, for speaking out on this issue? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
because you were literally not allowed to speak at certain events, for example. So
that's true.
That
But we ran better
happening
ones.
to women.
We ran better ones instead.
But it is shocking, isn't it?
It is
shocking because if you look at J.K. Rowling, and she is obviously the most high-profile example, and obviously she can maybe deal with it better than other women who are worried. And I have read what you've all said. You are approached by women who say they are scared to speak out because they're worried about losing their jobs, for example.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm a journalist, and until very recently I was The Economist's Britain editor, and they've been extremely good to me and have given me a leave of absence to go and work at Sex Matters, so I can't say my career has suffered. But just very recently I was invited to come and talk to a bunch of trainee child psychiatrists who want to know more about how you treat gender-questioning children. Very important question, because some treatment pathways put you on the path to sterility, to permanent interventions when you're still very young. And they dropped me from the programme because some of the people who disagree that you should be careful, go slow, do exploratory work with children before you do irreversible treatments. Some of those people sent the most outrageous defamatory remarks about me to the organisers, and in the end they had to drop me, and then in the end the conference was actually cancelled. So I don't care so much about me. I care about the fact that there are children.
And this conversation has haven't been had.
Yes.
Heather, women's sport, it's a real passion of mine. I absolutely love it. And if you look at some of these organisations like Stonewall, it feels like if the sporting bodies are going to continue to listen to them, women's sport, I believe, is at a genuine risk. Do you feel the same?
Absolutely. There's no women's sport. There will just be sport. And there used to be a time when it was just sport, and then women's sport came along. Cycling, I think it was 1984, before women's cycling was in the Olympics. I'm not sure if that's your lifetime, Dan, but it's not it's not that long ago.
No, it's not.
It's absolutely absurd that finally we had women's sports, and for some reason, some people in society think that they want to be part of that.
And team sports too. I mean, I'm a big supporter of the London Pulse netball team, and all you would need is one non-biological female in that team, and the whole game goes out the window.
The whole game goes out the window, but also there's somebody that's not taking part because that place is taken by a man. Now, that's happening at the grassroots. So we're not just talking elite sports here. That's right, down on the ground, community level sports. So people are dropping out. So there will not be any elite women because women, they're just walking away from it saying, I don't want to play football with men. And I think it was Guam over the weekend, was it? 3 women injured in a rugby match because there was a male player on the other side.
Shocking. So does this require government intervention?
If they don't fix it,
then
yes. I mean, the interventions that we've had to take, not me personally, have had to take, have been through the courts. That is fixing a lot of it. That is redressing the picture through the courts. So maybe it will be some nice big court case because somebody's been seriously injured.
Yeah, but we don't want it to get to that point.
No, of course we don't. We want this to just get back.
Now, Helen, finally, you know I'm going to ask you about this lunch that it feels like the whole world was talking about. So J.K. Rowling invited a whole load of campaigners who've been in a relatively similar position to her to party, basically. And what went down? What was it like?
I mean, it was, nearly 20 women sitting around talking about our nails and our hair and our makeup and our kids and our knitting and our cooking. That is not what we did. Yes. We had a lovely lunch. There was a lot of laughing, a lot of chat. Just what you would get if you had a bunch of people who've been dying to get together after the pandemic, who've been supporting each other on social media. Jo has been very kind and very generous in support of women who... She swoops in when she sees that somebody is being put under attack.
She does.
She was very supportive to my colleague Maya Forstater, for example, when Maya was kicked out of her job.
At great cost, by the way. And we're not talking financially here. But J.K. Rowling has essentially been hounded out of Hollywood. That is just a fact. How much of an inspiration is the stand that she's taken for someone like you?
I mean, it's actually impossible to express fully. So people did stand up at this luncheon, say a few words, several people just spontaneously, and there were tears. A couple of people stood up and said, if you hadn't reached out to me, I don't know what I would have done. I handed her a preprint copy of my paperback book, which is out on the 5th of May, and got her to write in it, and it will be now my most treasured possession is that copy of that book.
Amazing.
She said that it had been a game changer, I think, was what she said, and
amazing.
I'll be proud of that forever.
Well, look, what you're doing is absolutely brilliant. It's so important. And I'm literally now, usually I dread the MP arriving at my door, and I now cannot wait because I've got a question to ask.
You must let us know what he says.
I'm going to record it. I'm going to record it, and I will be ready to roll.
We have had some run away.
Really?
Yes.
But look, you're making a big change. Thank you so much for being here. It's a brilliant campaign. That was Caroline Fisk, Heather Binning and Helen Joyce, the brave women's rights advocates running the Respect My Sex If You Want My Ex campaign. Now, coming up, as he offers to buy the platform for £34 billion, is Tesla mogul Elon Musk our only hope for restoring free speech to Twitter. Rapper and author Zuby is uncancelled on that at 10:40. But next in the Media Buzz, Harry and Meghan have finally bowed to public pressure and paid a secret visit to the Queen and Prince Charles. But will this be enough to save them from becoming pariahs on the world stage after their snub by European royalty? My Superstar panel will dissect this Windsor bombshell straight after the break.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Let's return to tomorrow's News Tonight now on our Media Buzz. More front pages are in. The Sun leads on this secret visit to the UK by Harry and Meghan to meet the Queen. They also met Prince Charles in their first joint trip back here for the Royal Runaways in 2 years. The Daily Mail also featured that news that Harry and Meghan have flown in to see the Queen. The paper understands they arrived incognito on Wednesday and are believed to have stayed overnight at Frogmore Cottage, the home they have kept on despite quitting the UK. But leading their newspaper, the PM has vowed that he won't let the left ruin his plan to fly asylum seekers to Rwanda. And nor should he. On the Daily Telegraph front page, Russia parades captured Britain. A British man who has been fighting in the Ukrainian army has been paraded on Russian TV after being captured and apparently severely beaten. 28-year-old Aidan Aislinn from Newark-on-Trent was seen handcuffed and covered in bruises. God will pray for him. Pray for him tonight. On the Daily Mirror, inhumane and it won't work. The paper reports on the fury surrounding Boris Johnson's Rwanda plan, which has been branded shamefully cruel. My superstar panel return now. I'm joined tonight by the Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, the Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson. Now, as we just saw on those front pages, Prince Harry and Meghan's reps have confirmed to GBNews that secret face-to-face meeting with the Queen. GBNews also understands they met with Prince Charles despite their ongoing rift. The Sussexes were spotted at Windsor Castle ahead of the traditional Maundy Tuesday ceremony by stunned visitors who told The Sun the couple smiled and waved. It's a little late for that, though, right? If you want to get Brits back on your side, Harry and Meghan. And what the hell took you so long to visit the Queen, who's 95 years old and has recently battled COVID? Could you not have done this 2 weeks ago so that you could have paid tribute to the late Prince Philip at his memorial? Despite finally bowing to public pressure, I'm not going to give these too much praise. They were, after all, only 55 minutes away by plane after being enticed out of their Montecito mansion for Harry's Invictus Games in the Netherlands this weekend. Perhaps they were looking for a bit of royal treatment after being embarrassingly snubbed by the Dutch monarchy. The Sussexes will not be given an audience with King Willem-Alexander and Queen Maxima of Holland during their visit. Instead, they'll be staying in a hotel and have taken, quote, hostile environment training in preparation for being on the streets. Maybe actually they needed that hostile environment training for their meeting with Prince Charles and if they meet in Prince William, because things are frosty, right? Things are very, very frosty. Harry and Meghan, they're looking increasingly isolated on the world stage to me, maybe because they're addicted to the drama. And believe it or not, those aren't actually my words, but that of former Vanity Fair editor and the author of a bombshell new book on the royal family, Tina Brown. Speaking to the Daily Telegraph, she said in the Sussex marriage, they wind each other up and it's an us versus the world. And that's a disaster. It seems like they are in a powerful codependency, and I do question how it will end. So, have the Sussexes turned themselves into celebrity pariahs, or is this meeting with the Queen and Charles the start of bridges being built, Dominique?
I think it's getting to a point where it's conducive for their image to be building those bridges back with the monarchy, because as the dust has settled, one, nobody is as interested in them anymore because the only thing that kept them relevant, particularly in the States, was the controversy with the royal family and, you know, the apparent racism within it. And secondly, I think a lot of Hollywood A-listers have realised that they're actually not that interesting without the royal family behind them. And also,
and they've been horrible to the royal family, and Americans love the royal family.
Yeah, they do, but I mean, they did rally a lot of Americans behind them because obviously Meghan's American, and they did bring up the racial element of it, and they had American royalty, Oprah Winfrey, behind them. I think in terms of Hollywood A-listers as well, they've realised that Meghan probably is a bit of a narcissist, and they have big mouths as well. They report things to the press. They have their people slipping things in. Yeah. So no one's really going to want that.
That odd little bloke.
Yeah, Omar Scobie. So no one's going to want any of that.
He'll be on the phone soon after this meeting. I mean, it's interesting, Sean, because they can come over here and try and sort things out, right? But I actually wrote a column for the Mail Online earlier today about this book, Prince Harry's book that's coming out. And Prince Charles and Prince William are expecting to get a pasting in this book. So if you with your family, you don't then release an autobiography, do you? Slagging your family off.
Well, look, let's hope that isn't what happens. Ultimately, forget the fact that they're royals, they're family, and they should be able to come together, whatever the rift is, and heal it. It's a shame that we're talking about this trip being about, you know, their personalities, about their profile. I wish it was just about family. And you've seen it, the snub from the Dutch royals is basically, we respect the Queen, we understand the position she's in, we want to have nothing to do with disrespecting her, so we'll leave you where you are and we'll get on on with being Dutch royals in a very private way that the Dutch royals seem to do that. And associating yourself with Harry and Meghan may just pull you into the limelight in a very negative sense.
Yeah, not in the way that you
They
want.
should really, really pay attention to that, because people are throwing around the word pariah. I'm not sure if they're there yet, but if they don't step away from the drama, if they don't show that they can heal this rift, they will very shortly be non-interested and bored and alone in the corner.
Because it's weird, isn't it, to, like, not have anything to do with either of your families, and, like, it makes you look weird and very untrustworthy as well, actually.
They are a dysfunctional family.
Well,
yeah.
Who? The Markles or the Windsors? Or both?
Probably a bit of both. I mean, the whole thing about the Dutch royal family not entertaining them, that's kind of... They're sticklers for protocol, royal families. And Harry and Meghan are no longer royals, but I agree with Sean that if they have come back to heal the rift, both with the Queen and with, well, probably less with the Queen, but certainly with Prince Charles, that's really good. I hope he drops his ridiculous demands for police protection while he's here.
You don't care about these two, though, do you, Nigel?
No.
You don't think that?
No, I don't.
Of any interest?
No.
Why is that?
Because I think that they rule themselves out of being interesting.
Yeah.
That they walked away from royal duties. It's something, in fairness to the rest of the royal family, they take duty really seriously. Harry and Meghan walked away from that, and I think that that's, in a sense, it's not just a snub to the royal family, it's a snub to the whole of Britain.
Yeah.
And I think the pieces as well, there was a lot of excitement around having a black person in the royal family, a commoner marrying in. Two separate elements came together, and they seem to have destroyed that slightly. And
yeah.
People who were interested in the royal family for that have now then gone away. And for me, it's a tragedy it's a tragic story for a family. Your grandmother is 95 years old. Her husband has passed away recently. You should be around that woman, supporting her.
Very good point. Now, Gotcha Question has always plagued politicians and election campaigns, but it's hit a new peak in Australia ahead of polls opening on May the 21st. First Prime Minister Scott Morrison fell victim.
Have you lost touch with ordinary Australians? And on that theme, off the top of your head, can you tell me the price of a loaf of bread, a litre of petrol and a rapid antigen test?
I'm not going to pretend to you that I go out each day and I buy a loaf of bread and I buy a litre of milk. I'm not going to pretend to you that I do that. And I'll leave those sort of things to you, mate.
But his response wasn't as mortifying as that of the country's Labour leader and Morrison's potential successor as Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese.
I know how much the price of bread is. I know how much a litre of milk is. I know about those things that affect ordinary people. I'm happy to engage with you, but I'm not... it's up to people to ask whatever questions they want. Andrew.
What's the national unemployment rate?
National unemployment rate at the moment is, I think it's 5.4, sorry.
Oh, not often you'll hear me praise a Green Party politician, but kudos to this Aussie bloke, Adam Bant, who actually had a brilliant comeback when he was put on the spot about Australia's wage price index, which measures hourly rates of pay.
Wages growth wasn't going particularly well. What's the current WPI?
Well, Google it, mate. I mean, I would hope that at this election we can lift the standard and turn it into a genuine contest of ideas.
You're probably
OK, there you go. Well, wasn't good, was it? Now, coming up, the crowning moment of the show as I'll reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. But next, as SpaceX billionaire Elon Musk offers to buy Twitter for a stratospheric £34 billion, is he our final hope to save free speech on the platform? Rapper, author and podcast host Zuby is uncancelled in just a few moments. But first, quick look ahead to next week. I'll be back on Tuesday, but you're in the very safe hands. Safe hands? I don't know. He's a bit crazy, isn't he, of Patrick Christus on Easter Monday. I hope no one gives him any Easter eggs, though, because you know he's on this diet at the moment and he's got to stick to it before he does his whole Magic Mike routine. But here he is with what's coming up on Monday's show.
Coming up on Easter Monday's Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Patrick Christys. Are millennial parents too soft on their children? The UK's strictest headmistress, Alison Colwell, weighs in. Why is China the last country in the world to cling to this zero COVID delusion? Professor David Livermore shares his thoughts. Plus, I'll be joined by the superstar panel, senior reporter of the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, commentator and broadcaster Emma Webb, and TV favourite Sherry Hewson. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m, right here on GB News.
But now it's time for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, Elon Musk is one man you can't accuse of failing to put his money where his mouth is. Less than a month after these tweets, the world's richest man today tabled a sensational £34 billion bid to buy woke cesspit Twitter outright. His hostile takeover attempt comes just weeks after the SpaceX and Tesla bots bought an initial 9% stake in the company. It's a big chunk of his £200 billion net worth, but free speech champions think it could be worthwhile if Elon manages to prevent Twitter censoring voices it doesn't agree with, not least former US President Donald Trump. So tabling his bid, Musk said, "I invested in Twitter as I believe in its potential to be the platform for free speech around the globe. And I believe free speech is a societal imperative for a functioning democracy. However, since making my investment, I now realize the company will neither thrive nor serve this societal imperative in its current form." Twitter bosses are still discussing the offer. Elon said a no deal would force him to reconsider his position as a shareholder. So, Zuby, what do you make of this? Can Twitter be saved with Musk's intervention? And what do you think about that valuation?
Dan, I think that we live in very interesting and unprecedented times. I've never seen a move like this, let alone be able to see it play out in the real world, as we're saying. And I think that Elon ultimately, beyond any type of politics, Elon Musk is a disruptor. And I've been on the Twitter platform for over 12 years. As time has gone on, it's become a lot more censorious. They've moved against their original free speech principles. They've banned and deplatformed tons and tons of people, from high-profile people. I mean, you can't get more high-profile than a sitting president of the USA, and many people beyond that. So I think the fact that this is even shining a spotlight on this censorship effect and what's going on at Twitter, for those who may not even be aware, I think that in itself is very powerful. From a business perspective, having $200 billion plus is a lot to throw around. Whether or not Twitter will accept the deal, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of their shareholders has already come out and said this undervalues Twitter. But isn't the more fundamental point whether they actually want Elon Musk to take over?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I think perhaps you're referring to, I think it's one of the princes of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I think they own 5%.
Yes, their investment fund owns a significant point of Twitter. So even, I mean, seeing Elon Musk on Twitter having a discussion and debate and a confrontation with a Saudi prince is not what I expected to wake up to today. So look, I think as a business, as far as I understand, Twitter has not been making a lot of money. They've been losing a lot of money over the years because the advertising platform does not work in the same way it does with something, say, such as Facebook or Google. As a company, it needs to be shaken up. As a platform, it needs to be shaken up. They need to actually adhere to these so-called Western, liberal, and democratic principles of free speech, which simply means allowing people to have discussions without overwrought fears of censorship and being kicked off or being stifled. All of that is extraordinarily important. It's what makes shows like this so important, being able to discuss ideas. If we're not able to discuss ideas, then the only ways that we can solve problems are via segregation or via physical violence. So we always have to keep those communication pathways open.
Well, Zuby, I view Twitter as an anti-free speech platform now. I really do. There are countless examples. I mean, we just had the Respect My Sex If You Want My Ex women on. The number of women who have just tried to stand up for the rights of biological women who have seen themselves booted off that platform. And then just this week, the brilliant folk at the Together Declaration have done a really good job in terms of campaigning against vaccine passports and vaccine mandates and all of that sort of thing. They were apparently banned by Twitter for a period because they had posted about their campaign to go against enforced child vaccinations. So to me, Twitter doesn't encourage free speech. It's become an anti-free speech platform. So I actually think Elon Musk maybe is its last hope.
Yeah, and look, like I said, whether or not the deal actually goes through, I think the fact that people are shaken up by this is incredibly important. Because what happens with this sort of incremental creep is that it happens bit by bit, little bit of censorship by little bit of censorship. And then over the course of a decade, as you said, you look back on it and people are getting kicked off the platform for saying very basic things, which shouldn't even be all that controversial. And even if they are controversial, you should be allowed to say controversial things. You should be allowed to dissent. You should be allowed to go against the mainstream political and media narratives. And you should be allowed to ask questions. We're not talking about people here who are making violent threats against people or planning terrorist activity or anything like that. We're simply talking about people who have a different perspective. And if you support free speech, that's not for the views you agree with. That is specifically to defend people who you disagree with and may even dislike. That means that you are truly upholding free speech.
And I want to hear from people who I don't agree with, Zubi. That's what I don't understand. Yes. I mean, to me, Twitter became a joke. It actually became a joke. They're a laughable organisation. The moment that they said a democratically elected US president cannot be on this platform, but the Taliban can be on this platform, and the Russian Defence Ministry can be on this platform, the Chinese Defence Ministry can be on this platform. By the way, I'm not saying the Chinese and the Russians should be booted off. I'm just saying Trump should be there too. So I actually think they've just become a bit of a joke. But the problem is we can't all just quit Twitter en masse because we know it's where all of the journalists are. It's where all of the influencers are. It's where all of the politicians are. So, of course, sometimes we live in this fantasy world of, oh, we can go to Getter or we can go to Truth Social or we can go to a new platform. But Twitter does have a real power.
Mm-hmm. Twitter is a fantastic platform. It's personally my favorite social media network. The problem is that as a business, as a company, it's not run very well, and the moderation policies are biased and unfair. Yeah. That's what needs to fix.
But it never used to be that way. Yeah, and it never used to be that way. And I think Elon Musk, you know, you've just got to hope he's the man to do it, but we will see. Zubi, fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for being here. We'll speak again next week, Zubi, but it's time now to reveal the last Greatest Britain Union Jackass of the week. My superstar panel return. Dominique Samuels, your nominee for Greatest Britain, please.
Mine is Priti Patel. Got to hand it to her. Well done for finally addressing the migrant crisis. Go Priti.
Sean Bailey, your nominee for Greatest Britain.
My honorary Greatest Britain is the actress who played the young girl in red in Schindler's List. She's now in Poland, her native Poland, helping Ukrainian refugees across the border.
And Nigel Nelson, your nominee for Greatest Britain.
Mine is for Camilla, who stepped into the Queen's shoes with Prince Charles today to attend the traditional Maundy Thursday service. She's showing Meghan and Harry exactly how a royal should behave.
Yes, very good point, very good point. I'm going to go with Dominique and Priti Patel, though, because we've been tough on her, haven't we, Dominique?
Yep.
When she hasn't been able to solve this crisis, but she always said she would sort a deal, and I think this deal with Rwanda is a very positive start. Union Jackass time now. Dominique Samuels, your nominee.
Mine is the Metro. They covered this really bizarre story about this sex offender that was exposing their penis, a male sex offender. And the Metro had the tenacity to report this person's penis as female. I mean, last time I checked, I don't have a penis, but there you go.
Sean Bailey, your nominee for Union Jackass.
My nominee for Union Jackass is the Stop the Oil Eco mob, who started up all the traffic in West London today. There's two things to be said. Firstly, I think someone's going to get hurt if they keep doing this, and mocking the police and making their life hard. We have a massive crime problem in London. Wasting police time is selfish and self-indulgent. And secondly, I think they're losing the argument. your everyday ordinary person is now beginning to see saving the planet as a bunch of people who are self-indulgent and wasting our time.
And crazy.
Yeah, and crazy.
And Nigel Nelson, your Union Jackass nominee.
Yeah, I'm going to back Sean up with this, with a specific one. The Centre for Climate Change's Dr. Stuart Copstick, who's
and we saw him, didn't we?
Yeah, but who's been a bit of a dipstick by gluing his hands to the Department of Business. That's going to do nothing for global warming.
By the way, you are far too polite for calling him a dipstick. Nigel Nelson, I can think of a thing or two. But all I just think, I'm going for him. By the way, I'm going for him, Nigel Nelson. He is my Union Jackass. Because I'm sorry, if you are that much of a lunatic that you want to spend your Easter bank holiday gluing yourself to a door, please get a grip. Get a grip. Nigel Nelson, Sean Bailey, Dominic Samuels, fabulous superstar panel. Thank you so much for your company this week. It's been a really good one. Have a very peaceful Easter. I hope you get to travel wherever you need to go without Just Stop Oil getting in the way. I am back on Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Good night.
Hello there, I'm Stephen Keats and I've got your latest Met Office forecast for you. For tonight then, it's a mostly dry picture across the UK. The mist and murk will return for some of us, particularly around some coasts in the southwest. It's a bit damp towards northwest Scotland because we've got a weak weather front just fringing with parts of western Scotland, the Western Isles, maybe the far west of Northern Ireland. Later in the night, though, it will also be pushing back into parts of southwest Wales, maybe Devon and Cornwall. So a bit damp here later in the night. For many places, though, it's dry, variable amounts of cloud, a bit misty in places, and not particularly cold. Temperatures in towns and cities 7 to 10. Now into Good Friday, then, we've got this front hanging in the wings out towards the west. Further to the east, though, we're still under the influence of this area of high pressure. So that means for a lot of the UK, a fine and settled day to come